Hello and welcome to Dialogue. As China enters the final stretch of its journey toward basic socialist modernization by 2035, China's leadership is meeting this week to draft the 15th five-year plan, which will guide development from 2026 through 2030. The outcome of the plan will help shape China's trajectory for the rest of the decade, defining priorities from innovation and reform to green growth and global engagement. What will this next phase look like? How different might it be from earlier plans? And what does China's sustained development mean for a world navigating growing geopolitical uncertainty? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, joining me today are Hong Hao, Managing Partner and CEO of Lotus Asset Management, David Mahon, Executive Chairman of Mahon China Investment, and Professor Qian Jun, Executive Dean of International School of Finance, Fudan University. Welcome to the show. Well, Professor Qian Jun, I will start with you. For viewers overseas in other countries, what is five-year plan and how important is it to China's economic growth?
Sure. In fact, for someone like me who actually spent a lot of years in the U.S., while obviously spending the recent 12 years in China, China's five-year plan is a very unique institution because it basically lays out both at the macro but also at the micro level what the country is aimed to achieve economically and socially, and basically at the different stages of the next 5 years, we're going to come back and review how progress has been made, and at the end of the five-year cycle, as we are now at the end of the 14th fifth five-year plan, we'll have to summarize what has been done, what are the setbacks, so that we can make better planning for the country going forward. It is important to emphasize that 5 year is a very important cycle for economic growth and for financial system. So that it's not too long. If it's too long, then obviously goals set at the beginning of the point, maybe there's too much uncertainty to talk about realization. On the other hand, it's very important it's not too short, so that you don't pay enough attention to goals farther outside. So, and then finally, let me add that if you look around the globe, if you look at large economies, there aren't really that many economies or countries that can do this like China has done over the last 50, 75 years. And clearly, this is a big part of the new China, of the modern China, that we are able to carry it out successfully, overwhelmingly successfully, 14 five-year plans. And certainly, we're at a juncture that the next five-year plan is very important for both China and the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, you have been staying in China for years. I mean, you understand in China, you are from New Zealand, you understand the Western practice. In the West, it's about the election year. You have a new government, you have new policies. But here in China, 5 years, a circle, and then new guidelines for the development. How do you characterize the five-year plan here?
Probably 10 years ago, many foreigners and even some Chinese analysts looked at the five-year plan as being outdated, no longer fitting the market economy. And I think if we're honest and look back into the history of the five-year plans, some 5 years did not go well. But what's interesting in an age of considerable transition and tumult globally, looking at the manner in which the five-year plan functions, it is a stabilizing force in the Chinese economy. It's also a process of refining institutions. And one thing that is assumed about China is that its institutions are now all fully developed, when actually they're still in the process of evolution. So the five-year plan is important in reviewing where we've come from, but also making sure that policies refine them going forward, make them stronger and more relevant to the market. So they have become something almost, an old thing has become something new in a force in shaping the Chinese economy.
Hong Hao, in terms of preparing the priorities for the next 5 years or the focus of the economic expansion, what is the backdrop for prioritizing the development for the next few years? Or, where are we as we look at the next 5 years?
Yes, well, I think China is going through a period of transformation. I think the last couple of years, China has been reinvesting very heavily in high-tech manufacturing industries and many of the new tech industries, and also doing away from a property-led investment growth model. I think it has achieved a certain level of success. For example, the Chinese manufacturing sector is now close to 20% of the value added by the global manufacturing industry, and also China is leading in many of the new high-tech industry manufacturing as well. So I would say that there are already a certain level of achievement after a couple of years of restructuring. I think going forward, China is heading towards a consumption-driven, consumption-led growth. In a sense that investment growth will be a lesser engine for Chinese growth. And going forward, we're trying to have more economic growth coming from consumption. And in so doing, I think the volatility in the economy and also in the market could be lessened. And then at the same time, the gigantic manufacturing sector that China has still can provide a certain level of support for growth going forward. I think this is the sort of the strategic orientation that we're working towards to. And I think we're going to hear more details in the upcoming plenary.
Very soon we will have probably more details there. But Hong Hao, people would expect some sort of continuity for the practice, probably in the fourth 40-year, 5-year plan. For example, probably high-tech development, resources will be channeled to continue to be channeled, let's say, to power that sector, and also maybe innovation, for example, or national security related probably tech development, as well as maybe some measures to spur domestic demand, the growth of consumption.
Yeah, I think technology investment will be a very important part of Chinese growth going forward, and already the government has already laid out a strategic planning for technological innovation, and many of the provinces' government has already come up with some investment plans. So I think technology going forward, because of its importance and also because globally speaking, we're seeing other countries more or less doing the same, right? So for example, U.S. Is engaged in a very heavy and fast development in this AI sector and semiconductor sector. And I think China is probably going to emulate that as well. So I think going forward, because the technological advance is going to create a new opportunity. One day, for example, you can have robots doing manual work for human being, and then it will free up Chinese people's labor to do other things and increase income and therefore increase consumption. So I think there's so many opportunities there, and the potential is huge. So one couldn't wait to see the outlines of the strategy going forward.
Well, Qian Jun, speaker for this tech development or high-tech development, I mean, this is also the area that includes like high-end manufacturing, which spurs economic growth. But at the same time, it also creates job for the young people. And of course, that's playing an increasingly important role in the Chinese economic policy making. Can we say so?
Absolutely. So I agree with Dr. Hong that technology-driven industries will continue to grow. Interestingly, they will generate more high-paying jobs. Obviously, as an educator, as a professor, what's also important is the education system need to catch up with the fast-changing world in terms of manufacturing AI adoption, and so forth. There needs to be the education system from the very young age to a professional worker. There needs to be a lot more innovations to catch up. Let me also add one new development in this high-end manufacturing and development, that China will play a more important role globally in the next 5 years, in the sense that we're seeing two trends. One is the Chinese companies are increasingly going abroad, going to a lot of new markets. In particular, they're going to more emerging markets. And this time when they go abroad, they're going to bring the homegrown technologies with them. So hopefully with the Chinese firms going abroad, we can share, we can reap the benefits of these technologies to more people around the globe. I say this is a very important change because ideally you need the tech superpowers to cooperate. That's the best for the human race. But at the moment, it seems like it's not clear the other superpower is thinking the same way. So I think in this regard, the Chinese companies and China should and will play a more important role in bringing technological improvement to all the industries and betterment of human lives, not just in China, but outside and around the world.
So are seeing that, like the one, Belt and Road Initiative, countries along, joining the initiative will benefit, probably more Chinese investment in the high-tech sector. And that's part of the Chinese, probably the focus of global engagement for the next 5 years?
Yes, I do believe global engagement now has some new categories. And I think I very much believe that the adoption of AI in all sorts of industry, traditional and new industries, in consumption services, is going to be a huge driver for growth and huge driver for growth of more jobs for people. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that given the current situation, given what's going on in the world today, I believe that China will play a very important role globally. And now, if I may also add that as a finance professional, with Chinese company playing a more prominent role in more parts of the world, on the financial side, I think you will see very new developments, perhaps very quickly in some areas, of RMB, the internationalization of RMB in the next 5 years.
In the next 5 years. Okay, we'll talk more on that probably. But anyway, I will have David. David here, I mean, domestically, but also, let's say, externally. Of course, we know the U.S. is imposing tariffs on the Chinese exports and also restricts the Chinese companies' access to advanced chips, for example, of course, containment, of technology or high-tech development there. So that probably also is a factor for China to rely on itself, to be more innovative, to develop a high-tech sector.
That's very true. It's interesting that since the first Trump term, the pace of this aim for independence to be applied has really picked up, and under Biden it accelerated. There was criticism of China becoming a closed economy, and terms like dual circulation were being basically ridiculed by many Western observers. None of them were looking at the fact that China was under severe containment. And when we all know the physical and potential latent military containment in the South China Sea and the Western Pacific. But that's really not important, ultimately. What has mattered is that there has been an attempt to contain China technologically. As a result, China has become a leader in many of the technologies which America has attempted for it not to develop. So it's a very interesting dynamic. The positive thing is that in China's development of the last particularly 12 months, it is sharing these technologies. DeepSeek is a good example of this. So rather than being a closed market for its own sustenance. It's developing things in the face of being prevented from participating in the globalized process of developing them together, but it's sharing them. So this is a very interesting transition for the global economy.
Well, David, the 2025 Global Innovation Index ranks China for the first time among the top 10 countries in the world. So that let's give us some confidence. Let's say the Chinese are also, capable of innovation. And what we have seen in robot, as you mentioned, or DeepSeek, and other sector, EV sector, for example, renewable energy sector, that are the examples probably that can boost confidence. Yet we can do that.
That's very true. I think one of the things which is interesting is that there was a view that unless you had a totally open system, you would not get innovation, and that Chinese education system, Chinese political and social structure precluded it from becoming competitive in innovation as America, which has been for the last 150 years an extraordinary source of innovation. However, people don't understand China is not a closed place with a few institutions. It's an immensely fluid and flexible system, both politically and economically. So within the system, people of merit rise. There's a huge number of people competing for key jobs. There's constant change of ideas of individuals. And so China also is an immensely decentralized economy, while being a very centralized political and social system. That decentralized economy has produced tremendous competitive and innovative dynamics. So to be seeing this within China, it's moving at a staggering rate of change. Little else can compare with it. I've just come back from a month being away out of China, and Western economies are developing. There is no dynamic as you would see today in China. So it's very exciting.
Well, Hong Hao, Qian Jun earlier mentioned about financial services. Probably we're growing along more investment, more trade, and also more tech investment in particular along Belt and Road Initiative countries there. Do you also agree? There will be more use of RMB, let's say, if not entirely internationalization of RMB.
Yeah, well, I think in cross-border trade settlement, the RMB is taking about almost 50%, or sometimes even more than 50% in cross-border trade settlement. So it was a giant leap forward, from a couple of years, from 10 years ago, when we have the last currency reform. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, the Chinese yuan is going to be increasingly in its importance in cross-border trade. For example, the trade with Russia and also, with many of the Asian countries, many of them are willing to accept Chinese yuan as a settlement currency. And recently, I think the Soybean Association of the US saying that, it's willing to take the RMB for its soybean purchase as well. So I think, it's making giant leap forward. I think in the next phase, because of the capital account is probably, one of the last few accounts that remain to be closed for the Chinese market and for the Chinese economy. And once we have RMB internationalization, one can imagine that, concurrently, we will reform the capital account, how we manage our capital, how we manage our forex reserve as well. And in so doing, the Chinese yuan's currency rate will be increasingly determined by market forces. And in so doing, we gradually open our capital account and make the Chinese market and the Chinese economy become a truly globalized economy. And I think when that happens, then, foreign capital will come in more and more, because investment opportunities and investment returns in China is higher. And also, productivity is higher here in China as well. And that augurs well for currency appreciation. So when you add all this up, it paints a very, very robust picture for RMB internationalization going forward.
Qian Jun, of course, we are seeing this appreciation of RMB. Of course, the gold, for example, kind of like a turbulence area at times, let's say, and we do see that increasing use of RMB, like currency swap with other countries. You want to purchase, merchandise there. but with also investment. But people would say there's a closed current account, so capital account, so it's just impossible for RMB to become like international currency. What do you make of that?
So this is obviously an important question. In my own view, I think there are like 3 stages for the complete process of RMB internationalization. The ultimate goal, obviously, is that RMB to become one of the major reserve currencies. For that to happen, we do need enough openness of the capital account. But and the first stage is Dr. Hong has already talked about, that is RMB being one of the major currencies in trade settlements. That's already happening. In my view, over the next 5 years, I think there's a middle step to connect the first and the final step. And that is there should be more RMB denominated assets, real assets and financial assets, so that international investors can invest in RMB assets both in China, we call that the onshore market, and also globally, like an offshore markets like in Hong Kong. That's one. The other thing is that I already mentioned that the new wave of Chinese firms going abroad. At the same time, there are also many more firms from Belt and Road Initiative regions that are coming to China. So again, RMB internationalization includes firms, Chinese firms and foreign firms use RMB denoted assets as a fundraising channel. That is, we should see more foreign firms selling bonds, for example, in RMB, both onshore and offshore. We should also expect to see Chinese firms going to Middle East, going to Southeast Asia, going to Latin America. When they sell bonds, they can also sell bonds. In addition to the local currency and dollar, they can also sell bonds in RMB. So I think that second part, that second function, is going to be the new push, the new frontier for more use by global investors and also global companies and Chinese companies. And if that were to happen, basically there's more reason and more scenarios, I would say, that for everyone around the world to use and to hold on and to use RMB to invest. So I coined the second stage as RMB should become and will become a major investment currency.
Investment currency then will lead further development there. But also let's get back to this priorities of 5-year plan. David, people we earlier mentioned a little bit about this domestic demand, which is weak currently. The government is trying hard to spur to stimulate domestic demand. There's an economist from Beijing University, Professor Lu Feng, recently said, if the next plan, the 5-year plan, addressed weak domestic demand, for example, setting a quantitative target to increase the proportion of consumption in GDP, in his words, I think it will be very desirable. What do you make of his remarks here?
Well, consumption is well over 50% of GDP growth already. I think it's sluggish when it comes to households in particular, but there is consumption. Across the economy, if you look at the data for the first 6 months of this year, there is an increase in consumption. Look at even retail sales is over 6%. But if you look at the reasons why people are not spending money, a lot of this still lies in the realm of policy. That's why this particular 5-year plan is so interesting, because we're waiting to see what will be done around the concept of welfare for households to feel more secure, so they save less and spend more. We currently have 22 trillion, that's 22 trillion US dollars of household savings sitting in Chinese banks. That money is relatively sterile. Now, if you look at the last few weeks, you can see a decline in the rate of deposits. That's good, because that money is going into capital markets, it's going into wealth products. So there is some change afoot, but there is an underlying lack of confidence, which is not so much in government or in the society itself. It's around these key issues for householders. So that's the big step that the Chinese government, I think, wants to make. But in making it, it's going to deal with localities that will have varied interpretations as how far they should go. But that's the thing that would really make a big difference. We do expect policy announcements to come in the next few days around that issue, and that'll be a major driver of consumption.
Well, Hong Hao, people would expect a focus or continuous focus on high-tech development, and at the same time, innovation, more investment in that respect. But can we also, prioritize at the same time, efforts to be made to make sure domestic consumption will grow in a solid way?
Yeah, I think the consumption is a function of income, right? So I think right now, because the Chinese consumer confidence is still at all-time low, right? So it hasn't improved since 3 years ago. And also, the disposable income, because of the job security and also because of many other factors affecting Chinese households' income. So, the household consumption is relatively weak, especially after the first half. The national subsidy for consumption purchase has expired and spent. So I think going into the second half, we do see a deceleration of consumption growth, especially in restaurants, hotel spending, and discretionary consumption spending as well. So I think going forward, the key really is how do we raise the income level for many of the Chinese households. For example, we can use tax reform, right? So to increase the tax-free thresholds for many of the Chinese households. We can increase social securities for many of the retirees. And also we can give more help for families who are having kids or more than one kids and having kids going to school for free, etc., etc. So I think some of these are being done already, right? So we're seeing child subsidies and free schooling for preschool kids. I think going forward, people are still expecting more from the government, and also in the process of transition to a consumption-led growth. I think more help from the government will indeed be needed to spur the growth in consumption.
Qian Jun, so it's about more spending in that respect to help people like childbearing, etc. More similar policies to be expected to help the consumption growth?
So, if I were to summarize our discussion so far, on the one hand, I don't have a problem of raising the fraction of GDP contribution from consumption. But as we have discussed, this is a system-wide project. You actually need every part of the economy to work together. David mentioned strengthening the social safety net. Dr. Hong and I keep mentioning that the education system, that the labor income should go up. So you really need, and this is the point about a 5-year plan, that you set a goal, but you also, not only you set a goal, you also set up ways to achieve that goal. And this is a very important target that's only achievable when all parts of the government, all parts of the economy work together.
Working together.
And with that, I want to add one more little thing, and that is for urban household consumption, if we can stabilize the real estate market, that can also go a long way.
Also,
in boost consumption.
Important factor. Thank you, Professor Qian. With that, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Qian Jun. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.